Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who have faces that look like an apple long forgotten in the barn. Right now, we are reading every short story. It's a line. It's a line from I'm sorry. Right now, we are reading every short story in Ann and Jeff VanderMeer's The Weird Anthology, including this one, Michel Bernanos, The Other Side of the Mountain. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in the sense of discovery. I think that a really, really good short story novella can make you feel something that you've never heard of a writer before. And it feels kind of like a great big flash of light, and then it's gone.
I'm Bob. I'm interested in, I think last time we made an episode, I said, this is my new favorite story from this collection. I think this is my favorite story from this collection, Zach. It is incredible. It's one of the longer ones, but it is an adventure. It reminds me a little bit of the genre stories we read before, where you're on a sea voyage, and it's just great. It's like Stevenson. But what I'm most interested in, I think we get a glimpse into what other authors have been calling the fourth dimension or the nth dimension. We get an attempt at depicting that.
Yeah, I feel like I was just hearing someone say that, like, the sign of a really bad critic, really untrustworthy reader, is the fact that they just rate everything 10 stars. They're just like, you should really only have like a couple 10-star books or reads per year. Ideally, a couple 10 stars in your life. But I feel like so many of these stories in this anthology, I'm just like, wow, what a shaker, what a heater. My goodness, I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. But first, before we talk about John Ray and the Fourth Dimension and Robert Louis Stevenson, all of which I want to talk about a lot, what do we know about the author, Michel Bernanos?
Bernanos was really interesting, died pretty early, I think 41, and pretty much wrote all of his novels, which there's almost a dozen. He wrote them all in 4 years, right before his death. And I think one of the really interesting things, too, is you mentioned his name earlier. He went under a lot of different, two main pseudonyms. And he used those pseudonyms because he wanted to get out from under his father's name. So I guess one issue, at least this is what his wife writes on the website that she still maintains for Bernanos. He was trying to make a name for himself, and he was trying to escape, I guess, all of the fame associated with his father, or trying to just, I guess, exist on his own as an author. But the way he says it, I think, is so interesting. He says, if I see a book by Dostoevsky, I don't have to remember that his first name is Fyodor. I think of the nice guy who would pick up my book and find himself face to face with an anaconda instead of a country priest. So he's, he's the anaconda in these books, and then his father would be the country priest. So going to get the book of his father would really shock you, I guess, reading his work.
Yeah. He told someone that, in confidence, he told them that anytime he wrote, he felt his father's paw on his shoulder. And he also said to that same person that his father crushed him. So I think this is really interesting because we've seen a lot of pseudonymous writing. Pseudonymous writing. I'm not pseudonymous writing. Yeah.
Pseudonymous is great though.
And it seems like it happens for different reasons. You know what I mean? But this is, I think, the first time I've ever seen someone who wanted to escape the legacy of their father. His father was a French Catholic writer. But something I thought was super, super interesting was that this story that we read, like you said, is the first one that he actually published under his name. He wrote it in 19 days, and he said he wanted to write something that he felt proud enough to put his real name on. And shortly after completing it, he ended his life. It was published posthumously. Really, like, so French to make a statement like that, to be like, this is my work. I'm putting this one out under my name, and then putting a period at the end of your personal sentence after that.
I think for a long time he dealt with a lot of depression. So especially in those 4 years, I guess he was going, and his wife in the writing compares him to being two different people. One who's, chipper and jolly, and then one who is really dark. And she said that no one could seem to help him. So I think it was going on for quite a long time. He had a really interesting life growing up. So they moved from France to South America. They moved to different countries. I think Paraguay was one of them. Yeah. And eventually they moved to Buenos Aires. They settled down in then Rio de Janeiro. So he moved around a lot, and I guess a lot of his work is inspired by living in Rio de Janeiro. But he was also he was really brave. At 18, he tried to join World War II to fight against the Axis, and he got in, even though he was under the age limit for what country he was living in at the time. And so he still got in. And then they said, no, you're 18. They kicked him out. And then he had to get permission like a different way from his father, and he got to go and fight. But there's a great picture of him and his father too, like being crushed by his father. His dad was like a whole head and a half taller than him. He was just huge. Wow. So, yeah.
Let's talk about what happened in this book, because I feel like we have almost like 3 different books stitched together in a really interesting way. Maybe 2 different books, but it's good. It's good.
It is good. I think it is 2 main books. Earlier, we talked about it being kind of sea voyaging. It's almost a Stevenson book. It's almost a Jean Ray story. And it's a young boy who's also 18, interesting, same age when he's trying to join the military. But he gets onto a ship. He is bullied right away. Life just sounds really terrible on the ship. All of the guys that he's working with are just idiots. They're trying to get drunk all the time. They're trying to steal all of the rum that the captain has locked away. They throw him into the water, so he's trapped under the hull of the ship. So anyway, terrible life. Eventually gets saved by Tuan, and is the cook. He kind of reminds me of Barbecue in Treasure Island. And so he takes him under, but except for Tuan is good. He takes him under his wing and he keeps him alive. And then as they get into what they describe as a tempest, just terrible storm, terrible waves. Everyone's dying. They're starving because all of the potatoes have sprouted. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. They have to keep dumping things over the ocean, over the edge into the ocean. And then eventually, pretty much everyone is dead as everything spins around. The mast they have to cut down the mast so they don't just keep spinning to death. And then this is where it becomes very Jean Ray. In the story by Jean Ray, the 4th dimension or the nth dimension seems to come out of the sea, or seems to be from the sea somehow, and everything transforms. You not only see it, you go into it, and that's where the story completely changes here. Everyone is dead. They're the only 2 left alive. They think they're going to survive it, and they end up in a very strange place.
A place where the salt water is sweet, where the sand is seemingly blood, and the trees all bow down to a big mountain that goes thump, thump, thump all night. It's a hell of a place to be trapped. And, I think one of the most interesting things is how they come across this village filled with statues, and the faces of every statue is just a visage of terror. And then they break one of the statues at one point, and they find a human skeleton embedded inside. And that's the moment when they're like, uh-oh. And this story does something that I love. I think we first talked about this when we first read Casino Royale. I could be wrong, by Ian Fleming, the James Bond book. But anytime the author gives the reader a countdown, like we know we have 10 seconds until this bomb goes off. 10. Bond does something. 9, Bond punches the guy in the face. 8, Bond pulls out his gun. Anytime we have a countdown, it ramps things up in a fun way. But the countdown here is that they start noticing what is that on their skin? Their skin is mineralizing. It's transforming from the outside into mineral. So as they climb up this mountain, they find it's almost like the bodies of their fallen comrades, but it's other people who were also scaling this mountain, but who completely turned to stone before they could reach the top. What a tale.
What a tale. It's like hikers reporting going up Everest and seeing the frozen corpses, the people that didn't make it on Everest. This is, I was saying maybe it's the nth dimension, maybe it's the 4th dimension. We have so many things that feel like what is referred to in Blackwood. When Algernon Blackwood in The Willows and in A Victim of Higher Space, he's talking about another realm that is not just a completely other place, but somehow is attached to our current 3 dimensions where we dwell now. But here it's like when we see these trees, maybe we're on an alien planet, maybe we're in hell, maybe we're just in a dream. We don't ever find out for sure where we are, but everything seems to be alive. There's even a giant blue eye somewhere. But the trees, when they bow down, it feels like they're almost like the willows trees. These things that, if you're in our regular life, you see them, they seem to be coming towards you. They're just shadows. They're maybe just trees. They're maybe just your imagination, but you're sure something is out there to kill you. But now you're at least, then you're at least separated. You know, there's two different dimensions. It feels like these two are in a place where no matter what they do, those things that are trying to kill them are right there and they have to see it head on.
I'm going to propose a spectrum to you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On one end of the spectrum, I think we have Algernon Blackwood's Weird. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have John Ray's Weird. For Algernon Blackwood, the way I read Blackwood is that of someone who writes about the sublime, like feelings of terror, not like I'm going to lose my life terror, but just like I have no idea what has become of the world or what this thing is. It is beyond the capacity of my limited human existence. And in that there is beauty and awe. That's Algernon Blackwood. That's my Blackwood. You know, that's what I see in Blackwood. And then on the other end of the spectrum, John Ray being someone who to me feels just downstream of surrealism. You know, the world is topsy-turvy, but it's fundamentally filled with familiar images, but but the images are twisted and skewed in some way. And probably my favorite image from John Ray in the story we've been talking about, the main Psalter, is a portal opens up on the deck of the ship, and out of the portal, a man jumps out and starts beating someone wildly, just fighting him. Eventually, someone pulls a gun on this intruder and shoots him, in the head, and he falls off the side of the ship. So they fish the body out, and when they fish the body out of the water, it's just a mannequin with part of the head blown off. It's just like, what? What do we do with that? Anyways, so my point being is when I think about the strangeness of the images here, the style that's going on here, I think that we are slightly more in the John Ray territory. There's a few moments that I would argue aren't like this, but more so in the John Ray territory, with water being sweet, skin transforming into rock, vines that are apparently snakes or perhaps octopus tentacles. It feels to me like we're very much in the realm of like dreamlike, poetic image transposition.
I think that's a very interesting spectrum to look at. I was considering too a kind of a spectrum of, well, not a spectrum, I guess two camps. It's like, is the weird evil, or is the weird, indifferent or ambiguous? Yeah. And I feel like in The Willows, Algernon Blackwood's The Willows, it's pretty, maybe it's just ambiguous, like it doesn't care. It's ambiguous for us and it feels ambivalent towards us. But then I feel like in John Silence, it's very positive. Weird stuff is going on. There's a lot of evil magic out there, but it's really just about your intention. And as long as you go forth with a positive heart, the world is okay, that kind of thing. You can figure it out. You can survive. You can help your friends to survive. That was also important in The Willows, but it's just so terrifying. These two friends survive, but there's that other guy who just does not. They see him, and that's the reality coming so real, so suddenly, it just shocks you out of any fantasy you thought you were in. This, though, it feels pessimistic except for the relationship between Tuan and the narrator, because they're the only two who are doing anything good. They're always looking out for each other. They're trying to make sense of this weird, terrible world. On the pirate ship, well, they're not pirates, on the ship and in this world. The final line is the only, this is after they've been turned to stone. Sorry, major spoilers. They've been turned to stone. There's no hope. All of these other stone-like corpses, they realize are real people, and they've kind of been bumping into them. So they all just slide down this mountain. They turn into that, but they've been there for like years. So they're recalling what happened in the past. So we're basically being narrated to by a stone statue. We don't realize that until the end. But he says, the only memory I have after centuries spent living inside of stone is of the gentle touch of tears on a man's face. It feels like the heart or the core of this story is friendship and these two guys trying to survive together, trying to at least do the right thing in this terrible place.
On the author's website, which of course is maintained by the wife and probably has some, is being influenced by the publishers, but it describes this story. It summarizes it in a single sentence as being about the survival of the human soul in the face of an angry nature that wishes to have total control over man. Now, I possibly disagree with this assessment. I don't think it's about an angry nature that wishes to have total control over man. I didn't personally see any evidence for that. But the survival of the human soul aspect, I think you pointed it out perfectly when you talked about the relationship between the unnamed narrator and Tuan. Their relationship is so good and so wholesome. And I don't know, I got some vibes from it. The way that Tuan is constantly referring to the narrator as son, I don't know if you picked up on that, but there's a very father-son dynamic in the relationship between Tuan and the boy. And, it added a tragic dimension, I thought, to this. It was a little sad, I thought.
It is sad. It's really nice, too. There's great moments where Tuan is kind of teaching him the ropes, on the ship. Everyone's bullied this poor kid. Tuan is the only one who cares. And there's a great moment, too, where he has to be kind of stern to him to save his life. And the narrator says, okay, Tuan kind of yells at me, but he looks at me with a compassionate face. So he's just trying to save me because I'm making noise at a time that really is dangerous, because there's all these other guys. They're drunk. They're dangerous. They do have kind of a father-son relationship. And the way that the French is translated for us is son. He often calls him son, even though, it's not a biological relationship. It just, they've become kind of adopted father and son. I was thinking, though, while it is nice, I think that the quote you mentioned just a minute ago is very interesting. This kind of nature trying to control people, or this evil nature trying to control people, because trees that seem to be moving, they can't, walk around, but they bow. They do sun salutation, as it were. Yeah. They are living in a certain way. It's in, it's in this kind of fantasy land. There's a big volcano. It reminded me of Middle Earth a lot. However, a Middle Earth that is completely hopeless. And I was thinking on fairy stories, the Tolkien essay about what he's trying to do, and this idea of what is it called? A micro-creation, or a kind of devotion to creation by recreating a mini version of it. And that's showing your devotion to the world. And so in making his fantasy, he's trying to do something almost religious. And even though it gets really, really dark and really, really terrible, there's always hope, because people are always cooperating, and you can achieve, you can escape that terrible place, you can fix that terrible place, you can work together to fix that place. But there's just so much that's similar, because here you are immortal, but you're immortal as a statue that can just crumble. People push you over. The elves in Middle Earth are immortal to a degree, basically immortal. There's trees like Ents that move around, that bow, that care about, they have their own kind of tree religion. It feels similar, but there's something very positive about Tolkien, even in the darkest depths. But here it's just really hopeless, even though they have that nice relationship.
I think you're really right to compare this to Tolkien. And, I'm really glad we read On Fairy Stories. The concept of subcreation, really, really interesting. I mean, for Tolkien, Tolkien's a Christian writer. So the idea is that the world we inhabit and live in today is the first creation. So that of any literary world is going to be a subcreation of the world we inhabit. But to compare this story and Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, I think that those stories have a sense of a greater good. There are characters who are higher than our main cast of characters, who represent the forces of good. And then there are other characters who represent the forces of evil. But here, I don't get the sense of any greater morality. There's something nefarious about, to skip straight to the end, there's something nefarious about a giant eye in a volcano, but ultimately it's not that nefarious. What if they're on top of a puppy dog's face? You know what I mean? I don't get the sense that it's necessarily evil, just that perhaps they might be a little bit small. But the other thing I wanted to compare this story with in terms of Tolkien and the way Tolkien talks about his own writing is the idea of eucatastrophe, not Y-O-U catastrophe, but EU, the Greek for the word good. A good catastrophe, a eucatastrophe, which is basically Tolkien's description for what he's doing, which is the story needs to end up in a good place. You need to finish the story with everything working out for our heroes in the end. And this story, this is just catastrophe. There's no you in this.
There's no you in this is just a catastrophe. I think another comparison too is they're both eyes, right? Sauron's eye is this big flaming eye looking out at everyone. There is this big blue eye when they feel attracted, like in many weird stories. I know I probably shouldn't be following this impulse, but I just can't stop myself. I go further and further up the mountain. I see statue after statue of just pure anguish on their face. And I know I'm starting to become like them. I'm starting to worry about that, but I still need to go and I need to see. Finally, you look down in this huge chasm in the crater of the volcano and you see this giant blue eye staring at you. It feels like very different from Tolkien again. I don't think they're even referencing each other. I think it's just completely random. But it feels like the pessimism is towards nature itself or towards the universe. Like it looks at you completely indifferently, almost maliciously, if it's going to turn you into stone, if it's going to preserve you in this kind of torture chamber of just a stone statue forever. It feels it just hates humanity or it doesn't care at all, doesn't even know what it's doing. Whereas in Tolkien, the world itself is very good, but it's been corrupted by couple, Melkor and then later Sauron. It's been corrupted. You can put it back in order, but it seems like nature itself or that creation, that sub-creation does care about its characters, does care about the people living in it. Whereas here, the only saving grace is that little tiny relationship. But that little tiny relationship is so small, their eyes are probably 1/10,000th the size of that huge blue eye. They're so much smaller than this huge living earth.
I guess I do want to say one more thing about the landscape, which is I think that Bernanos is a really good ecology writer. I don't know how to say this, but his descriptions of the landscape were really, really beautiful. Like there were times when I was reminded of what's it called, the Painted Hills outside of Oregon, part of John Day Fossil Beds, where basically the earth there is in these stripes of red and tan and orange, is as if someone took a paintbrush across the hills. Something about the descriptions, his descriptions of the landscape, the soil falling to water and it being like blood. I just thought it was so vivid. Even if it was meant to be a surreal image, I could still see it in real life happening. Like when you drop red clay into water. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's beautiful, it's stunning, but it also feels like human. I was saying earlier, it's so indifferent to humans. However, it seems to be imitating humans, or it seems to be alive itself. It's as if it is just a big, blown up version of human suffering, and it's just become a planet. Because when Tuan steps into the river, he says, "It wasn't like sand was displacing and my foot was dropping down. It felt like an actual mouth came up and grabbed my ankle." The river itself tries to eat him. There is blood everywhere. Like everything is blood. The crater is full of blood with one big blue eye looking up out of the blood. The mountain itself seems to be blood. It just is so human in a really disturbing way that feels completely inhuman. Unhuman, inhumane. It feels not human at all, Zach.
Let's talk about the first part of the story, because I loved it. I loved it so much. And I thought that was all that we were going to get, almost like a seafaring yarn where people start eating each other. And I was totally okay with that.
And then, we got blown away by that second half, which is also a masterpiece. But it's great. It's so violent. It's like Stevenson with just cannibalism, rotten stomachs, people falling off the edge of the boat. But it's fun anyway, because the two of them are trying to survive. They're in the kitchen. The cook and the narrator, and they just have a little bit of flour to survive. It was a really great seafaring yarn. I think just the quality of his writing is fun, even if it doesn't get to that crazy other planet, other dimension. Even that seafaring yarn was great.
And I like how the transformation of Tuan in some ways mimicked that of oh my gosh, I want to call him Seabiscuit, but Long John Silver, I can't remember what his original name. Barbecue, yes. Oh, yeah. Barbecue's transformation into Long John Silver. So he he's just a lowly ship's cook, but then suddenly he starts coming out with all of this knowledge. I could read the stars. I could pilot this ship. And you realize that the Tuan is actually something much greater than he was initially presenting himself as. He might be a man in disguise. And for me, I was like, oh my God, we're doing Treasure Island again. We're doing Treasure Island. And then Tuan pulls aside the kid. And he's just like, I don't know anything. I'm just bluffing. I thought that was such a nice little twist.
That was great. He's so confident. Yeah, I know. I can read the stars. Well, I wouldn't know the Big Dipper from the Little Dipper. That was really fun. It's strange too, because it feels like they're on the equator somewhere. And I was starting to think, are they near the Bermuda Triangle? Is this a Bermuda Triangle story? But I don't think it ever gets that specific. The weirdness starts to happen. I was wondering about the difference between this and genre, because genre seems to be, once you get to a certain place, the weird takes over, because the guy who hires the boat, the main salter in that, it's like, you're going to come with me to a place. And everyone's like, okay, a place. Yeah, a place. And then you don't find out that it's a really weird place until weird stuff starts happening. And this, they just get completely lost. They have no idea where they are. They've killed the captain. They've run out of food. They're killing each other. And then all of it just starts happening. But they get afraid of things, and it feels like all these like bad omens are kind of happening. They make bad decisions, and it's like they're pushing themselves towards whatever this is. But then when the tempest happens, it seems like the tempest itself is like an entity of the weird trying to push them there. They describe it like this. They're trying to put their boat back together. They're trying not to die. But then the water starts spinning around them. It says that there's all of this thunder and evil omen, and then a galaxy of stars unfolded above. They can suddenly see the stars. The waves are low enough. But then it feels like there's this cyclone of water spinning around them. And he says that all around us was a liquid void. And as this happens, they make this, everyone pretty much is dead at this point. They make this transition in between our old world and into this new world, because they say that they see these mysterious beasts that are 10 meters at least wide. They resemble giant jellyfish or octopuses, tentacles as thick as tree trunks, umbrella shells strangely speckled with red. So in being confronted with this, it's like that giant whale that raises up in genre. There's something about the weird, or the nth dimension, or the fourth dimension, that also exists here, and it seems to have a little bit of power to try and push you towards that other dimension.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think you're right to talk about them being transported to a different time, space, dimensionality in the way that they were in genre. Because when I initially read it, I saw it as a journey to the Hollow Earth. Like, is that Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the World? Maybe H.G. Wells. Damn it. But whoever wrote Journey to the, we've read a number of Hollow Earth stories already, actually, primarily in our audio episodes on Spotify, come to think of it. But, the center of the earth, as it was thought of at that time, was this land of mythical beasts and dinosaurs and things which are extinct in the above world, and it has its own closed ecosystem. I initially read this as a Hollow Earth story. But I think you're right, especially because of the way the stars kind of wink out for them and, and show completely different constellations. It does. I think you're right that it is, they've gone to some other realm, some other dimension, some other place. Man, I really I feel like this word dimension really bothers me, because it's like, on one hand, I feel like some people are talking about, a literal mathematical dimension. And I think this is how Blackwood uses it. Things that can inhibit 4-dimensional space, which our 3 dimensions can never see or interact with, versus what they are in, which is also 3-dimensional space mathematically, but it's just another world, another place, somewhere far from home, a land of strange things. So I don't know. I wish there was different words so that we could more accurately draw the line between these ideas, but that's my personal bone to pick, and you all got to live with it.
I think that is a big concern of the weird, though. So as we continue to read more and more weird, we're going to find out really what is going on here. But I think it is, fourth dimension, some sort of mathematical. I don't know anything about math. I was watching one of the math teachers today writing like 2, arrow 2, 4, 3. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And then I continued to teach English. But I am interested to see, too, is it a mathematical thing, or is it a different kind of world? But it's strange how either these authors are doing it intentionally or just seems to work out in the exploration of these places. But there's a weird parallel between stars winking out in our world when they first start out on the boat, and later when stars slowly wink out in that other world, because the darkness is strange. There's nothing really to block the darkness in this strange, weird, bloody volcano full of bone, corpse, statue world. But they just wink out one by one. It feels like they're almost in some mind, and when that mind decides it's time to go to bed, everyone else goes to bed too. And it's really disturbing. While it is beautiful to think, okay, trees might have their own intentions. Maybe they have a soul. Maybe if you walk by a tree, you should say hello to the tree. But there's something disturbing when they all bow at once. They don't seem to notice you at all. And when you walk by them, they'll just grab you and, choke you by the throat. I think while it is just a weird adventure land, there's something threatening, something lurking in another dimension for us. Maybe not really, but there's something to an other place to us that we can see manifesting in our current place, just like in the Willows. You think you're looking at trees, you think you're looking at monsters, you think you're looking at trees again, and then really you can't tell anymore. But the effects of whatever it is, you can observe because they are harmful to you, or they're at least harmful to that other guy who got drilled full of holes.
Well, I think for me, I am curious to see if this is the last of a dying breed in this anthology, because to me, the story feels very 19th century, despite being written well past the middle of the 20th century. And I'm very curious to find out just how many more stories like this we have ahead of us in the Weird Anthology. We'll see. Talk to you later, Bob.
Ahoy, Zach.